Thank you, everyone. I appreciate everyone joining us this evening. My name is William Whitson. I'm a senior advisor to the long-term recovery team in Aransas County. We want to share with you this evening about a very important project that's part of our recovery plan. This project was born out of the early days of Harvey and some of the terrible experiences that we had to face as a leadership team in the early days of the recovery. We're hopeful that now we are making progress and moving forward on what we believe will be a great project that will make a difference in the life of the community for some years to come. And with that, I want to introduce you to the real brains of the outfit, and that is Colin Jackson, who's the IT director for Aransas County. And Colin, if you'll take it from here and introduce the judge.
All right, thanks, William. As William hinted, this project was born out of a communications blackout that occurred during Harvey. It exposed a clear infrastructure vulnerability in our community. This project study is to help Aransas County, area partners, and communities realize available federal grant dollars and to build a resilient fiber optic broadband network by closing the gaps in our infrastructure that natural disasters like Harvey revealed. I'd like to now introduce Aransas County Judge Burt Mills and welcome him to the virtual podium.
Thank you, Colin, and welcome everyone. I'd like to point out how important this project is to not only Aransas County, but to our friends in the surrounding counties. Just let me tell you a story about Hurricane Harvey, a personal story. It's an experience that no one wants to have, and you cannot imagine what the people that went through it went through. We were the bullseye. That was bad, but was even worse, it decided to sit on us for 13 hours. And to compound that, 9 of those 13 hours, we were without any communications in county or with outside world. So you can imagine, this presented a lot of problems. And no matter what anybody says about sat phones and what you see on TV, they don't work inside buildings, and they don't work when the weather is bad and the phone cannot connect with a satellite. So they were worthless. To tell you the story, my wife and I were here. We have 2 sons and a daughter. The 2 boys live here in Texas. Our daughter lives out of state, and she got word through social media that Aransas County was completely destroyed, and even stated that emergency operation building was destroyed. And she knew that's where her mother and father were. So you can imagine the effects that had on people. And when our sat phones finally came available and the word got out that the social media is not always right, that was quite a relief to a lot of people. I will have to say that Colin and a colleague of his did find a copper wire, an old ground wire, telephone wire, and they got it connected. So we had a good connection with the outside world, and that was a godsend. So we're really excited and appreciative for all the hard work that this team has done and the possibilities of this project and the efforts of this broadband to be in our near future. So that the situation we went through during Harvey will never happen to anyone in the future after a major disaster. Now I'd like to turn this over to the Mayor of Rockport, Pat Rios, who is our local partner.
Thank you, Judge. And I'd like to welcome everyone that's joining us tonight for this community event. It's very important. As an elected official and the chief official in the city of Rockport, our only charge, in fact, our responsibility is the health, safety, and welfare of the community. When we lost all ability to communicate on August 25th, 2017 with Hurricane Harvey, it sent a jolt to this entire community. We couldn't speak to our police. We couldn't speak to the emergency operations center down the road. We were staying at the Rockport Service Center with 16 volunteers, a couple of 5 department heads, city manager, and myself. And we got word while we still had internet that people were frantically trying to connect with us because they heard that the Rockport Service Center had been destroyed. we wanted to get that message out, and at 11:45 that evening, we were scheduled to do a telephone update via cell service with CNN. And as we were speaking to them, we had two different cell phones. We had a AT&T phone and a Sprint phone. I was on the AT&T phone speaking to the station, and just as we started to communicate, everything shut down. We lost AT&T. We had a midnight call scheduled with MSNBC in New York, and talking to the producer, I explained to him that we needed to get the message out to families that were listening that we were still safe. And he argued a little bit, wanted to know more about the storm and the effects we were feeling. And I said, well, all we want to know first is let everyone know we were safe. So we started the call. And just as I started to say, I want to reassure everyone that the people in Rockport, and we lost all cell service and it was gone. So this is extremely important. I look forward to the discussion tonight, and wish everyone well, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Judge Mills and Mayor Rios, Colin and William. As we've heard from the very people who experience leading these communities in the long-term recovery effort that Hurricane Harvey has created, this part of the recovery is critical and necessary, the communication structure. There are many stories on the screen now in front of you, and you probably have your own story about how the lack of communication impacted your life. What this workshop and what this feasibility study it aims to understand and uncover is to build something that will outlast and withstand the unexpected yet inevitable events of the future. Most recently, some of you, even in the advanced questions submitted through registration, mentioned the recent winter storm in Texas and experiencing the loss of power, internet, and even water. I'm willing to bet that impacted your families pretty significantly. And for some of you, it may be just a small inconvenience, while others, it may have even been scary. So these are the types of events that we don't know that are coming, that we want to plan for in the future, and that the county, Aransas County, City of Rockport, and area partners are all planning for. Next slide, please. I'll hand it over to Vanita to introduce the team.
Thank you, Sarah. I would like to introduce the CobbFendley team assisting Aransas County with the feasibility study phase of the project. CobbFendley and Associates is a general and civil engineering firm. We specialize in municipal broadband project planning to implementation. I have my colleagues working on this project attending the workshop today, and also we have teamed with Pioneer Partners, and we have Sarah and Herb presenting today. In the first half of our presentation today, we will review the project background and the purpose of this project. We'll also do an overview of networks, primary and secondary benefits, and the opportunity that allows. Then in the second half, we will begin the feedback and discussion portion of this event.
We know that you are all going through a lot of changes in this last year, to include this very aspect of joining a workshop virtually instead of in person. As much as we wish we could all see your faces and be able to engage with you in an in-person manner, thank you for the adaptation of this virtual workshop today.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Herb C. I'm with Pioneer Partners, and it's a real privilege to be able to be part of this project. So what can you expect this evening? Well, the goal for tonight's event is we want to engage with you. What does that mean? We want to be able to listen, learn, and understand your thoughts on this project. There's never been a more important time to have a voice on what's going on in government, and we want to hear from you. So this virtual event was designed very purposefully to accomplish tonight's goals, which is really to help understand how you feel about things regarding this fiber project. It's fast-paced by design. We want you to be able to share your reactions, and we'd encourage you to not overthink things. Try to overanalyze things, because a lot of the answers is really going to be based on the sentiment and your life experiences that you have that is with you every single day. So if you'll embrace this process, it'll be both informative for us, valuable for you, and most importantly, it's going to be an opportunity to be able to have a voice, to be able to help shape the project. So with all that said, participation is essential. Lastly, there's no judgment here tonight. We want real answers. We want your sentiment, your opinions. It's essential for us to be able to understand, learn, and listen from you in your voice with your unique and personal experiences to help us understand what's important to you. If we do this all tonight, we promise this will be fun. And again, as Sarah mentioned, we welcome Q&A at the end. Use the chat function, submit your questions, your comments, and we hope this will be a very lively and informative presentation this evening. Next slide, please. So with that said, what can we expect? Well, we're going to try and channel everyone's inner Einstein here for a moment. So if you might recognize Albert Einstein, he was a pretty smart guy. And Albert Einstein was once quoted as saying, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." So this evening, we're going to go ahead and look at things through a little bit different lens. And so as you've heard from some of the government officials this evening, that there were some significant problems that every community can have in a time of crisis. We have to think about things differently. So how can we avoid things that we can avoid, because hurricanes are unavoidable, but how we react to them, well, that's an opportunity to do things different. So with that said, this is part of the participation now this evening. We're going to do what we call a chat storm to be able to get you all warmed up to participate. What's a chat storm, you say? Well, a chat storm is an opportunity to be able to provide your commentary, but we're going to do so in a very special way. So I'm going to ask a question here, but as you're going to the chat function here on the Zoom page, as you're typing it in, before you hit send, what we'd like to do and encourage each one of you to do is to type it in, but don't push send yet until we say push send. Well, so I'll count you in. I'll say something like 3, 2, 1, send. And the reason why is we don't want anyone's answer to be less important than somebody else's. There's a tendency, whether we're in person or virtual, that an answer that you might give might influence somebody else's answer. So we're going to try and avoid that. So for those of you that are participating this evening, we're going to go ahead and start this. So my first question this evening is, and it's an easy one, we're going to get you warmed up. In which part of Aransas County do you live or work in? So go to the chat function. Don't hit send yet, but as you're typing it in, stop right before you hit send, and I'll count you in. So hopefully right now you're going to chat. I can see the chat function here on my screen. It's at the bottom of the page. Now you're ready? 3, 2, 1, hit send. Great. Downtown Rockport, Cape Valero Estates, the South, Plano, very good. Okay, everyone's doing great. See, that was pretty easy, right? So now we're going to do a little bit more tough one, but this is going to be a fun one. So I know that everyone is a little bit fatigued from 2020, right? Were we a little bit scared what 2021 was going to be like? Well, for you all in Texas, my gosh, you guys have really started 2021 with some pretty tough weather there. So we want to be very respectful, and certainly it's an opportunity for us to learn. So with that said, what are you most excited about in 2021? So again, as you're thinking about the answer, don't hit send. Go ahead and type it in, and I'm going to count you in again. So I'll give you a couple extra seconds. What gets you most excited about in 2021? What gets you most excited about 2021? I'm sure some of these answers will be really great. So here we go. I'm going to count you in. You ready? 3, 2, 1, send. I see the vaccine. I see getting out of the house. Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. Changes. The pandemic ending. Oh my gosh. Getting back to normalcy. Absolutely. These are all great answers. You guys are doing great. So now that we're warmed up, we're going to go ahead and advance it to the next slide. Advance the slide, please. Next slide.
Thank you, Herb. And just to give some background and the purpose of the project, the main purpose of the study is to outline a plan for developing a fiber optic network that would be resilient to natural disasters such as Harvey. The fiber optic study was funded by CDBG-DR resources through a grant from the Texas General Land Office, and Aransas County is the lead county, representing 4 others, including San Patricio County, Refugio County, City of Rockport, Victoria County, and Nueces. This grant, which is not yet approved, is for $47 million, and that's CDBG funding for hazard and mitigation. If the network is fully funded and implemented, it has multiple secondary benefits for the area, which we will touch on in a few minutes. The key purpose is that in order to better prepare for future emergencies along the coastal bend, a fiber optic network needs to be developed that will assist local, state, and federal officials communicate under extreme emergency conditions. The network, again, if developed over the next couple of years, will also assist the local economy. The hope is that it will be fully funded, but right now this is just a study to determine the actual feasibility of designing the network. Next slide. So this is a map of the Aransas County area, and what you see in red is the route planned for emergency management. This is a route for which the CDBG grant is applied for. The goal is for it to be underground, creating a loop, which is completed with the white route, and that completes the circle for redundancy. This would keep the network connected in an emergency. So if there is a cut, for example, in any one area, the connection will remain because it can be rerouted within that fiber loop. This total loop would be approximately 270 miles of fiber infrastructure. The feasibility study that we're currently conducting is including as many local stakeholders and communities as possible. Once we complete the study, we will have a better idea of the estimated cost to build the fiber infrastructure. We have about 12 cities involved and 6 counties. The loop would also be putting fiber in areas that don't already have connections as an alternative to current providers. I'm now going to turn it back over to Herb to discuss the network benefits.
Great, thank you so much. So whenever we're looking at fiber network, the benefits are really profound. And in fact, in some communities and in Europe, they view internet access to be an essential right to life, much like water is these days, because we live in an information economy. Without access to high-speed fiber, it's really hard to use the internet. And so if you look at some of the more specific areas, tonight we're going to be talking about the public safety communications implications. We're also going to be talking about the economic benefits. And these economic benefits just aren't for businesses, but they're for residents. They're really for both. And then lastly, we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the other communities across the United States. There are many to choose from, but we're going to be giving a couple very key examples to be able to look at to see what has been done. And this might be the opportunity to be able to look around the corner for what can be done in Aransas County. Next slide, please. So first, let's start with some of the network benefits in the public safety communications. So public safety has a lot of realms. So in the time of a natural disaster to perhaps, a school shooting, perhaps there's, other things, but really public safety takes on so many different realms. But one thing that we have to remember is that without the ability to move information freely, when we need it, and when especially we need it the most, public safety communications to the public is really lacking. And a great example of this, if you might think back to Hurricane Harvey, is they were issuing what they call individual assistance, or IAs. And these messages were really designed by FEMA to be able to provide the residents the ability to seek the help that they needed. But ironically, these messages were primarily sent and you required internet access. And internet access in a time when all the networks might be jammed or the fiber optic load is really strained, you can't access. So even FEMA couldn't get through to all the people as fast and as quickly and as conveniently as they would like. And that's one example. Another area is emergency communications. So if you think about, let's say, first responders, police, fire, EMTs, folks that maybe it's an everyday crisis, perhaps they're heading to a traffic accident, making a hospital run, or maybe it's again, a Hurricane Harvey or some other more dire things recently, again, even the weather-related things that you've seen. The inability for first responders to be able to get on the network. There's a network called FirstNet, which is one example of several networks that can really rely on a primary channel for communication between first responders to other first responders. But all these types of networks require high-speed fiber. And if you think about if you've ever been to a sporting event, could be a high school game, could be a professional game in a stadium. If you've ever been trying to post a selfie on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, you can't get network connection because you're fighting for signal coverage with all the other folks that you're sitting next to. Well, imagine if you're instead trying to post a selfie, you're trying to communicate with a police chief or a fire captain, or maybe the ambulance to make sure that they're going to the right location. Again, public safety communications requires high-speed fiber, and this is really important. Next slide, please. So if you think about broadening the view beyond that of the public safety, well, Digital divide, who will this serve? Let's first talk about the economic benefits and what exactly is the digital divide. The digital divide today is really described as those folks that do not have adequate or any access to the internet. And adequate is all relative, but I can tell you, if you've ever been trying to load a page on the internet and you're fighting for bandwidth, perhaps you're at home on a Zoom call with 2 or 3 or 4 other people in the house these days, all going to school or working, you know what it's like when your page is loading slowly. The digital divide are some of those folks that do not have access at all or at home, or those who do not have the ability to work from home or learn remotely. So if you look at this, education is incredibly important. In fact, out of the 3,240 schools, high schools in Texas, it's estimated that 1 in 6 high school students do not have adequate internet access. They cannot learn remotely. And in this day and age of Zoom learning at home, I mean, that's essential, you know, especially for every age and every grade, but especially in high school, the formative years right before you may go off to school or trade school or enter the workforce. If you can't get on the internet, what are your grades going to look like and what are the skills that you're going to learn? If you look at the remote work piece of digital divide and how fiber optic networks can help, well, Texas is second only to California relative to the number of workers that are working remotely. And before the pandemic, 5.2% of the workers in Texas were already working remotely. Now, post-pandemic or during the pandemic, because we're not really post yet, how many people are now working remotely? Well, again, if you can't get a good connection on Zoom or WebEx or whatever it is, or even just the ability to pull up web pages to work, it's really hard to hold a job and be really valuable in the workforce. Another area is telehealth. Telehealth is really described as being able to deliver healthcare services via the internet. So it can be doctor to patient, it can be patient to doctor. It could be a number of things, but whoever initiates it, if you think about a doctor trying to go visit somebody in a remote facility, that's what telehealth was thought about historically. But today, telehealth is essential. You might have everything from psychiatric to counseling to routine visits to wellness to baby visits to even those folks that are in the vulnerable population of the elderly that can't make it out of the house. Telehealth is essential. In fact, 50% of all the physicians in Texas were online in April of 2020, and today it's estimated that 80% are online. Why? Because we have to, and we found a new delivery mechanism. If you don't have high-speed fiber, it's really hard to have that. Healthcare also really is taking a different form. If you don't have access to the internet, how can you fill out forms? How can you check insurance coverage? How can you go look at what the symptoms may be? How can you even go look at all the different things you should be considering when selecting a doctor? And so all these different aspects of healthcare show up, and if you don't have access to the internet, it's tough. As far as employment opportunities, well, 84% of all the companies these days are actually using the internet to be able to recruit. If you don't have access to the internet, you may have to go to the local library. You can certainly do it on your phone, but some of the forms on the internet for employment applications are pretty long, and using your thumbs is not always the best way to go. So being able to have high-speed fiber, it's not just the speed, but how many people can get on all at one time. These are essential reasons. And lastly, access to information. We live in the information age. More than ever, we realize the value of accurate, timely, relevant information at our fingertips to be able to help us all make decisions as leaders, parents, students, workers, community members, whatever it may be. But if we don't have access to the information that we need when we need it, that's really an impairment. And if you were to look at some of the other impacts, well, infrastructure monitoring, again, coming out of the weather system here in Texas, the power grid, water systems, being able to understand when the grid may be down, the water systems may be compromised, and understanding at the utility crew level where they can deploy their workforce to be able to repair it, send crews before somebody's even calling in, expediting the ability to maintain power lines. That is really one of the hallmarks of infrastructure monitoring. Utility companies have really been working a long time also to be able to control power consumption. You've seen that firsthand in the state of Texas here recently. And when the grid is getting overloaded, the utility companies can make decisions to perhaps do temporary rolling blackouts, regulate certain activities, but really it's essential that we keep the grid up. And then lastly, economic development. Studies have shown that without high-speed fiber to community, both workers that may have moved out of the area or companies that are looking to be able to relocate or expand in an area, they really require workforce development that requires high-speed fiber. Millennials graduating from college, people needing information, even the trades, everyone increasingly uses internet to be able to provide daily commerce and make decisions. And without high-speed fiber, commerce slows down, jobs can be reduced, and really high quality jobs that we all desperately need in every community can become very, very compromised. Next slide, please. And so if we were to look at a couple key examples around the country, and there are literally hundreds around the country, but Aransas being a thought leader, this is really an exciting time. Chattanooga started down this road in 2010. So 10 years ago, they installed a fiber optic line, creating high-speed fiber, and really it was designed to serve both residents and businesses. And they've done a great job. The goal was to be able to create a more reliable, faster, and a more robust network, and especially in the day and age of 5G, and look at all the different things that are powered off the internet. Chattanooga's gotten a head start, but a lot of other communities are recognizing how essential this is. In San Antonio, Texas, 38% of all the households lacked in-home internet access here recently. And it was only very recently that San Antonio officials decided to use $27 million in CARES Act funding, which came from the federal government. And they decided to expand the network to 20,000 students in 50 of the most vulnerable communities and neighborhoods. So this is really an exciting, most important way to be able to look at investing in the community, be able to provide those folks that need it the most, the high-speed fiber access. And in Mountain Bellevue, Texas, what really drove that project was unreliable, low-speed internet. And again, if you're trying to load a web page, whether you're trying to apply for a job, look at medical information, trying to make decisions for your kids or whatever it may be, you've got to have high-speed fiber. And in some communities like in Mountain Bellevue, the local providers were coming back with installation bids of $30,000 per business. That's a pretty big bill for most businesses to afford, especially if you're a small business, which really provides almost 90% of the jobs in this country. And on the resident side, some of the new subdivisions didn't have the service, and yet the developers were being asked to spend as much as $3,000 per new home. They didn't want to pay it, but the residents going to pay that. So Mountain Bellevue created a solution that not only helped the businesses and the residents, but they really paved the way to be able to provide for a sound foundation for growth and helped people make good decisions, not only to stay in Bellevue, but also be able to come back to Mountain Bellevue with their businesses and create good jobs and be able to help them thrive and grow their economy.
So for this last portion of the workshop, we've got about 20 minutes left. We'd like to use this for two things: facilitated discussion, which we'll do for about 10 minutes. And I'm going to share some survey results that we are looking at live based on what you all just submitted. We're going to welcome you to raise your hand, use that raise hand function we talked about at the bottom of your screen if you would like to participate with your voice, and we will allow you to talk. You may need to push unmute once we give you that ability, just an FYI. And then after that, we will be going through our questions and answer session. We have several questions that were submitted in registration, but we most welcome the questions of those who are here live on the call today. So feel free to submit your questions that are top of mind now that you've heard the presentation and learned a little bit more about what this feasibility study is about. Submit it in that Q&A icon and we will get to your questions. All right. Herb, if you want to join me on video here, and we can tag team this, and I'm looking at the results on my screen, and I'm seeing a couple things that kind of stand out to me that I'd like to share with everyone. So one of the questions was, what do you like most about living and or working and or visiting Aransas County? And some of the top answers are the opportunity to help shape the future of the community, the proximity to the coast and the natural beauty, and the small town lifestyle. Those are kind of the rise to the top things. Those are great aspects that we want to preserve, right? We want to make sure that we do everything you can to preserve these beautiful things about living and working and visiting in and around Aransas County. And believe it or not, this discussion really does help contribute to that preservation, just like Herb was mentioning in the economic development benefits that come along with the fiber. Specifically, it looks like a majority of the responses that we have indicate that you use the internet for personal use, meaning health, managing bills, finances, a place of work that is not home. So if you're going into an office or you work outside of your home, and remote work and using it in a place of business, such as retail, restaurant, professional services. So it sounds like we have some business owners on the call as well. And then we have school. So really work and business related uses and personal use are the top uses. However, some of the struggles that you all face accessing the information, and this is just me looking at this live, so we'll be able to include a better analysis of this in the feasibility report, but it looks like the accessibility to information online is an issue. It's poor. The ability to work and learn from home, pretty good. We got a rating of good, 7 out of 10 is the highest rating on that one. We also have kind of a 4 to 6 rating on the speed of the internet, and a 7 rating on the availability and coverage. Again, these are just preliminary numbers, but I think that it looks like the reliability, the provider options, and some of the ability to work and learn from home are some of the biggest inhibitions. So now that I've shared kind of a mind dump of data, I'd welcome anyone to share your story, your comments, your thoughts about, raise your hand on that Zoom, use that raise hand function, and we'll open it up. We would love to hear your personal story about your ability to connect and use the internet. Any brave first takers?
And Sarah, while we're waiting on an answer or two, there are a couple things that you said that were the result of some of the feedback that I can also try and prime some of the conversation here further, if it might be helpful.
Sure, and I see 2 hands raised, but why don't you prime that first, and then we'll open up Jack, and we'll open up to Jack after you.
Okay, well, just a quick soundbite, and exciting to have feedback. And so if you think about even going to and from wherever you may have gone today, so the internet provides a lot of things that you cannot see, and if it is working properly, it's invisible and functions very seamlessly. So if you think about traffic signal synchronization, you can think about being able to have wayfinding directions on your phone. If you've used GPS in the last 24 hours, you might have relied on signal that can also be more robust. If you use looking at traffic, traffic jams or weather, if you pulled up weather, the weather conditions, you may not realize this, those also affect transit speed, which also can show up under GPS function for estimated time of arrival on your phone. All of these are functions of the internet providing the confluence of data that's coming all to your device to be able to help improve your quality of life without even you realizing it. So Sarah, do you want to go to Jack here and open up the microphone for Jack and the next person?
During the hurricane and also during the recent problem with the weather, contact people outside of their neighborhood or outside of Aransas County. Y'all touched on that, but I think where we do this, in order for it to be successful, we're going to need to put some public points in each of the precincts and in the city where citizens can go in times of emergency and contact people in other areas. And then the second part that concerns me is I'm 71 years old, and I remember whenever we put Neil Armstrong on the moon with TRS-80 computers. Right now, my watch is more powerful than a TRS-80 computer. What's going to be the issue with the technological upkeep of the backbone that we're going to install? I think it's an excellent idea to do it, but it's got to be upgradable. How are we going to do that, and how are we going to set funds aside for the future to do such thing? Thank you.
Sarah, can I tackle the part of the technology upgrade piece here?
Yeah, and I might welcome Colin to jump on for this question as well.
Okay. Well, you raise a great point, Jack, and really you've got to think about the technology in a couple of different components. You've got the hardware piece, you've got the software piece, and then you've got kind of this conglomeration where you've got devices that have what they call firmware riding on top of, the networks. And firmware can even be things like cars that have embedded software. But the hardware piece and specifically the infrastructure and the fiber, that once the fiber is installed, the ability to continue to provide more robust capabilities, similar to your analog with a TRS-80 computer, the processors are separate and away from a lot of the fibers. So there's a lot of endpoints that you can power through devices that are being connected by the fiber. So certainly the fiber requires upkeep, but once the fiber's in the ground, the conduit's there and you're powering it, there's an aspect of some of the upkeep and the modernization and maintenance of this that is actually software, and the infrastructure piece is one of the most difficult aspects. That's just one aspect of the answer, but I'll invite other panelists to comment too.
Yeah, we plan to have plenty of capacity in the fiber available underground, such that other companies might be able to lease it from us and expand their coverage and expand their services to the community. And through some of those revenues, which would be basically targeted to what would the maintenance cost be, it would be cost neutral to the county and to the other jurisdictions. So we basically would gain revenue from letting the private sector utilize the network, and then we would recover our costs, and we might even enter public-private partnerships to maintain it. So those business models are being developed, and that will be spoken to in the study.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Cheney, for your comment and question. I see two others with their hands raised. I just want to make sure that we jump to those folks. We've got Pete, we're going to open your mic next. And then on deck, we're going to put Charla and Roger Ingalls. You'll be on deck after Pete. Thank you. Pete, go ahead.
Well, hello, everyone. I really do like this project, that what you all are doing. And I know that to have a secure communications infrastructure is very, very important. I've worked in the industry for 30 years, and I like the fact that you all are going all out to make sure that you have a fiber backbone in there as well. We started working on building infrastructures through public-private partnerships last year to work with the CBRS spectrum, and we raised quite a bit of money. So we'd like to, stay close to this project and see what you're doing, because we do have funds to fund these type of projects. And I just want to say that I'm excited about what you're doing. I was told about it by a gentleman who used to be the president of the Arlington Police Association. He told me that you all were having this meeting and I should listen in. And I like the project, and if we can work together and work something out, we certainly have the funds to help you get this project going.
Well, we certainly like to hear that, and we would love to particularly get in touch with you. If you, William, do you want to send your email to Pete, and we can make sure that we get connected?
Yeah, absolutely, Pete. It's W for my first name, William. So W Whitson at aransascounty.org, and let's get in touch, and we'd love to collaborate and see what kinds of options may be available. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. All right, Charla and Roger Ingalls, if you want to go ahead with your comment, we're opening your mic now.
Thank you. We live out in Cape Valero, and the only options we have for Wi-Fi out here are either Rockport Wi-Fi, which a lot of us use, and we love those people. But unfortunately, we can't get very high speed with them. So some of us have switched to HughesNet, which is a satellite provider. And again, we can watch Netflix maybe 2 days, and that's it. And just to watch this Zoom video today, just now, the message came up saying my internet was unstable. So we're kind of at a loss. We've tried to get Spectrum to lay cable out here and they won't do that. So we're really sitting out here with very few options and excited to see if we do get fiber optic, when it might come to our area. I understand that this, and rightfully so, is more for emergency planning. We were here during Harvey, had to rebuild our house and know what, that was like going through that. So we really appreciate that part of it, but we'd also like to know if there are plans in the future to extend it to all parts of the county. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for your question, Charla. That's exactly the story that we are trying to address. And Colin, I know that we talked about this in our preparation for tonight's workshop even, and just the critical need. Do you want to go over a little bit about what the goal of having this broadband ready community really means?
Sure, thanks, Sarah. So this goal, and the goal of this project is, as we've explained, to fill the digital divide that was brought up earlier. We want to become a broadband ready community. We want it to be easy for Spectrum, AT&T, and the other carriers that are out there to come in and say, they've got conduit, they've got infrastructure, they've got fiber in the ground. It's easy to get there. It's not going to cost $30,000 to extend that cable to this neighborhood. The goal is to make Aransas County and surrounding area ready for broadband internet access. So it is definitely something we want to expand county-wide. Our initial goal, of course, is emergency management, but we do have the ultimate goal to be a broadband ready community and to be ready for that fiber to get to your door, to get you that high-speed internet.
Herb, do you have anything to add to that?
I do. Charlotte, it's interesting. There was a study that's come out here recently, and it's estimated that in the next 4 years, the number of internet connected devices in your home, and we're not talking about exotic stuff. We're talking about things like Ring doorbells, which are essential. I mean, if you look at the number of packages that the average house has had to receive during the pandemic, we're all receiving more goods at our front door than ever. But also the porch pirates are there, or if your notification, you can't quite get to the door, you got to be able to have internet connectivity to be able to alert you when somebody's at your door dropping off a package. But things like the Nest device, the thermostats, the Ring doorbells, home security systems, but even internet connected devices like appliances. It's interesting the amount of bandwidth that we're all going to be consuming without even realizing it. It's not just Amazon Echo and the Alexa device that's taking bandwidth. It's all the things that are essential to the quality of life. They're all going to get hooked up to the internet. So I feel for you on the Netflix communication. And again, it's amazing how connectivity is really powering our lives these days. Thanks, Sarah.
All right, thank you, Herb. William?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that I agree with everything that Herb said and Colin. We have our goals. Unfortunately, we have a funding gap and it'll take time. But we want to head in the right direction. We want to expand the opportunities, and this won't come quickly, but it won't come at all if we don't get this grant. So there's kind of two realities here. If we get the grant, it'll happen quicker. If we don't get the grant, then we're going to have to turn to other options, and the speed of that implementation will be slower. And we'll just have to kind of take it as it comes. But our hope is to get this moving as quickly as we can. And the judge has been real clear with all of us that this is what he wants to see happen. And we have a lot of partners that we're working with in the private sector and the public sector. And I might add that the EDC, the local Economic Development Corporation, has just passed a resolution supporting all of this. So we think it's a positive thing, and we're all rowing in the same direction, and that's what we're after.
Hopefully that answers your question. We have a question that was submitted in the Q&A. Again, if you can either raise your hand or you can submit questions in Q&A to continue to answer questions. We have about 2 minutes left, so we'll make this one quick, and then we're probably going to roll into wrap up. This one's from Kathleen Doyle. If fiber optic is available, do residents still have to pay providers, i.e. Spectrum, to have access? I'm going to tackle this one real quick, William, and then William, if you want to fill in. Really, what a fiber backbone is creating opportunity for other providers, such as Spectrum and the AT&Ts and other local providers, to come in and provide that, what we call fiber to the home option for actual residents. So the city or the county or the government would not necessarily be the internet provider in this scenario. This is infrastructure that allows more providers to come to the area, creates more competition. Competition creates lower prices and better reliability because they need to provide a higher quality. Competition is always good. It's the best way. It's a little bit of a long game, but by having the infrastructure there, it makes it easier for more providers, including new ones that may exist yet, to come and be the providers to the residents. Anything to add, William?
Not much. You covered it real well, Sarah, but it's that last mile, it's the most expensive for these companies to invest in. So that's why you don't have it. And so if we could come in and close that gap, then we want to invite all these other competitors to come in and ride that rail and provide these services. And that competition, we think, will bring down prices and increase quality.
All right, with that, we're at 6:59. If we can bring up the final slide, Jared, please. Thank you. As he's bringing up that slide, we just want to say thank you so much for attending tonight. This is an important conversation that we continue to have. This is just the beginning of a conversation. We hope that this kicks off more feedback and two-way communications with the residents, businesses, and citizens of Aransas County and the area partners. Just as next steps, so that you're aware, we're going to have the comments and a summary, including a recording of this Zoom session, available for public consumption on the county website in the coming weeks. So we're going to be using the feedback that we got tonight in the survey and your commentary. Thank you so much for that, to help us shape the network design as the feasibility study is developed. And then again, that survey is going to be open for another 48 hours for any other final submissions. And then the actual documents for the feasibility study will be available this summer. So be on the lookout for, what kind of the full available public documents, including the feasibility study and the report itself. As a follow-up, we encourage you to continue this conversation in more than just, a one way of reading the media and the news. We want you to continue to come and give us feedback as well. If you have additional comments, ideas, you come across, an article that you think is important for the leadership to know, please send it to us. We've got a form on the website that you see. It's aransascounty.org/Harvey, and you can submit your thoughts and questions there. This concludes the workshop for this evening. Thank you again for your participation, and we hope you have a great evening.